My mother-in-law stood up at the dinner table on that hotel terrace, looked at my 4 months pregnant belly, and said, in front of 11 people, let's be honest, nobody really believes this baby is an accident. She's known about Daniel's trust fund since the day they met. The terrace went silent, except for the sound of the ocean somewhere below us. My husband Daniel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. His father stared at his plate. Welcome to Her Untold Nights. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe and turn on the bell. Because what I did over the following 6 months is something Diane never saw coming. And I think you're going to want to hear how it ends. I am a labor and delivery nurse. I have spent 11 years in delivery rooms, holding the hands of women in the most vulnerable moment of their lives, staying calm through emergencies that would send most people into a panic hemorrhages, cord prolapses, babies who arrive needing immediate resuscitation. I know what it looks like to keep your hands steady when everything inside you wants to shake. So when my mother-in-law, Diane Calloway Reyes, accused me of faking my own pregnancy for access to her son's $10 million trust fund, in front of his entire extended family, on a hotel terrace we had rented to celebrate the news, I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I set down my water glass very carefully, the way you set down something you don't want to break. I said, Diane, I'd like you to say that again, slowly, so I'm sure I understood you correctly. She said it again, slower, crueler. My name is Harper Reyes. This is the story of what happened over the 6 months between that sentence and the morning I finally set something down on a different table, one she never expected to see. I met Daniel Reyes during the worst week of his sister's life, which is a strange way to fall in love with someone, but is exactly what happened. I was the labor and delivery nurse on duty the night his sister Vanessa came in at 31 weeks with severe pre-eclampsia. It was a frightening night, the kind where the whole care team moves with a particular focused intensity because the margin for error is thin. Daniel sat in the family waiting area for 11 straight hours, and I was the one who came out periodically to update him, because that was my job, and because something about his quiet, steady worry made me want to make sure he always had real information instead of vague reassurance. Vanessa and her baby were both fine in the end. Daniel found me 3 days later in the hospital cafeteria and asked if he could buy me a coffee to thank me. I said the coffee was free for staff. He said he'd buy me a meal then. I said yes. That was 6 years ago. I was 28. I had already been a nurse for 5 years by then, had already built a career and a life and a small but solid savings account entirely through my own work, long before I had any idea that Daniel Reyes came from the kind of family where money was not something you budgeted, but something you managed. Daniel's family had built their wealth 2 generations back in commercial real estate, and by the time Daniel was born, the family fortune had grown into something substantial and carefully protected. Daniel himself worked as a high school physics teacher, a choice that I came to understand over years of dating and then marrying him was its own quiet act of rebellion against a family that measured worth primarily in net value. Daniel's mother, Diane Calloway Reyes, had never quite forgiven him for it. She had also never quite forgiven him for marrying a nurse instead of someone from what she called, more than once in my hearing, our kind of circles. Diane was not a woman who raised her voice. That was, I came to learn, one of the most dangerous things about her. She delivered devastating sentences in the same calm, pleasant tone she used to order at restaurants. She had spent decades as the unquestioned matriarch of a family that had organized itself, almost without realizing it, around not upsetting Diane. Daniel's father, Robert, was a quiet, conflict-avoidant man who had built his entire marriage around accommodation. Daniel's sister Vanessa, the one whose difficult delivery had brought Daniel and me together, was kind but conflict-avoidant, in the same way her father was sweet to my face, careful never to contradict her mother in public. I had been warned gently by Daniel himself before our wedding. He said, "My mother is going to test you. She tests everyone. The important thing is that you don't need anything from her. If you need something from her, she'll use it. If you don't, she eventually leaves you alone." For 5 years, that mostly held true. Diane made occasional comments about my career, calling it, more than once, such important, humble work, in a tone that managed to compliment and diminish in the same breath. She made comments about our modest house, our practical cars, our choice not to vacation at the family's properties as often as she would have liked. I absorbed these comments the way I absorbed difficult moments at work, professionally, without letting them land anywhere permanent. What changed everything was the trust fund. Daniel's grandfather, on his 25th birthday, had set up a trust that would distribute $10 million to Daniel upon his 35th birthday. No conditions, no requirements, simply a milestone gift structured generations in advance. Daniel turned 30 4 months before our dinner on that hotel terrace. The money had already been transferred. It sat, mostly untouched, in conservative investments, because Daniel's relationship with money had never changed, despite suddenly having so much more of it. We still lived in our same house. He still taught physics. I still worked my shifts at the hospital. Diane, I think, found this deeply frustrating. She had spent her whole life believing that money announced itself, that having it meant displaying it, upgrading your life to match your net worth. Daniel's quiet refusal to do that, his insistence on a life that looked from the outside almost exactly like it had before the trust existed, seemed to offend something in her. And then, 2 months after his 35th birthday, I found out I was pregnant. Daniel and I had been trying for over a year. We had quietly gone through 1 round of fertility treatment that hadn't worked, and we were in the process of considering a second when I found out on an ordinary Tuesday morning that I didn't need it after all. I cried in our bathroom for almost 20 minutes before I could even call Daniel into the room to tell him. We were thrilled. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly thrilled, in a way I want you to hold on to throughout this story, because it makes what came next so much worse. We decided to tell the family at a celebration dinner Daniel's idea, his attempt to make a happy moment feel appropriately significant for a family that measured significance in events and venues. He booked a private terrace at a hotel along the coast. He invited his parents, his sister and her husband, his aunt and uncle, 2 cousins. 11 people plus the 2 of us. I was 4 months along, just barely starting to show, glowing in the way I had watched hundreds of patients glow over 11 years of doing this work, finally understanding it from the inside. I had no idea, walking onto that terrace in a soft blue dress I bought specifically for the occasion, that I was walking into the worst evening of my adult life. Let me take you fully into that terrace dinner, because the cold open only gave you this sentence. The whole evening matters. Dinner had gone well for the first hour. Daniel made a toast. Everyone was warm, congratulatory, the easy warmth of a family celebrating good news. I remember feeling, in that hour, genuinely happy, the kind of uncomplicated happiness I had almost stopped expecting from gatherings with Daniel's family. Diane waited until dessert. She had been quiet for much of the meal, which I noticed, but didn't think much of. Diane often went quiet when she was building towards something, the way a held breath precedes a sentence. When the plates were cleared and coffee was served, she set down her cup, looked at me with the same pleasant expression she used for everything, and said the words that opened this story. Let's be honest, nobody really believes this baby is an accident. She's known about Daniel's trust fund since the day they met. I want you to understand the layers of that accusation, because they took me a moment to fully process even as I sat there. She was saying I had married Daniel 6 years earlier, long before any trust fund activated as a calculated long-term strategy. She was saying our struggle with infertility, the year of trying, the failed fertility round, the bathroom tears, had all been theater. She was saying my pregnancy, the most physically real thing happening in my body at that exact moment, was a fabrication or a manipulation. The terrace went silent. I have already told you what that silence felt like. I set down my water glass. I asked her to repeat herself. She did, slower, crueler, adding, I just think it's worth saying out loud what everyone at this table is already thinking. I looked around that table. Robert was staring at his plate. Vanessa looked horrified but said nothing. The aunt and uncle exchanged a glance I couldn't read. Daniel, beside me, had gone very still in the particular way he went still when he was struggling to control his anger. He said, Mom, that's enough. Diane said, I'm simply being honest, Daniel. Someone should be. I said, very calmly, Diane, I have been a labor and delivery nurse for 11 years. I have watched dozens of women go through fertility struggles. I went through my own for over a year before this pregnancy happened. I have medical documentation of every step of that process if you'd like to see it, though I find it deeply strange that you would need to ask. She said, I'm not asking for documentation, Harper. I'm simply noting the timing. I said, the timing is that we have been trying to have a baby for over a year, and it happened to work 4 months ago. That's not a conspiracy. That's biology. She smiled the same pleasant smile she always wore and said, we'll see. That was peak 1. I want to tell you that the evening ended there, with Daniel standing up and ending the dinner, escorting me to the car while his father attempted, weakly, to smooth things over. It did not end there for Diane. Peak 2 unfolded over the following weeks. I learned, through a conversation Vanessa had with me privately, that Diane had hired a private investigator not, she claimed, to investigate me directly, but to understand the full financial picture of our marriage, including a request for information about my previous relationships, my financial history, and this detail still makes my hands go cold when I say it the exact date of my last menstrual period before conception. Information she had apparently tried to obtain by calling my ob-gyne's office directly and identifying herself as a concerned family member. The office, properly trained in patient privacy, had refused to release anything, but the attempt itself told me everything I needed to know about how far Diane was willing to go. Daniel was furious when he found out. He confronted his mother directly, and the confrontation, by his account, was the worst conversation they had ever had. Diane did not apologize. She said she was simply protecting the family's interests, that $10 million was not a small thing, and that she had a right to make sure her son wasn't being taken advantage of. I said to Daniel, that night, "Your mother thinks I am taking advantage of you. She thinks our marriage, our years together, this baby, she thinks all of it is a financial strategy." Daniel said, "I know who you are, Harper. I know what's real. I'm sorry she's making you doubt that I know it. I didn't doubt it. What I doubted, more and more as the weeks went on, was whether Diane was someone I could safely allow near my child." Peak 3 came in my 6th month, when Diane showed up unannounced at the hospital, where I work not at my home, not at a family gathering, but at my actual workplace, during my shift, asking the unit secretary whether she could see my prenatal records as the baby's grandmother. The unit secretary, who knew me well after 11 years on that floor, called me immediately, rather than engaging with the request. I came out to the waiting area to find Diane sitting calmly, as though this were an entirely reasonable thing to do. I said, "Diane, you cannot access my medical records. Not as a grandmother, not as anything. That's not how this works, and I need you to understand that attempting it again could constitute a serious privacy violation." She said, "I just want to understand the situation fully, Harper. Surely you understand a mother's concern." I said, "I understand a mother's concern very well, Diane. I am about to become one. What I'm seeing from you is not concern, it's control. And I need you to hear me clearly. If this continues, I am going to have to make decisions about what kind of access you have to my child after she's born." Diane's expression flickered the first time I had seen anything other than calm composure on her face. She said, "You wouldn't keep my granddaughter from me." I said, "I will absolutely keep my daughter safe from anyone who treats motherhood as a financial conspiracy to be investigated. That includes you, if it has to." I walked back onto my unit. My hands, I noticed, were shaking for the first time in this entire ordeal, not from fear, but from the specific, focused anger of a woman who has just understood exactly what she needs to protect and exactly who she needs to protect it from. That night, after my shift, I sat down with Daniel and told him everything that had happened at the hospital. He was angrier than I had ever seen him, a quiet, controlled anger that frightened me a little, because Daniel was not a man who got angry easily. He said, "I'm calling her tomorrow. This ends now." I said, "Daniel, I need you to let me handle the next part. Not because I don't want your support, I do, completely, but I think there's a way to do this that actually changes things, instead of just creating another fight that everyone forgets about in a month." He asked what I meant. I told him about the part of my job that people don't think about when they imagine nursing the documentation. 11 years of charting, of writing things down precisely and factually, because in a hospital, what isn't documented didn't happen, and what is documented protects everyone, including the people you're trying to protect from themselves. I told him I had been quietly keeping a record since the dinner on the terrace, not out of vindictiveness, but out of the same instinct that made me chart every vital sign and every conversation with a difficult family member on my unit. Dates, direct quotes, written down as soon as possible after each incident. The private investigator conversation, as Vanessa had relayed it to me. The hospital incident, including the exact time and the unit secretary who had witnessed it. Daniel said, "You've been building a file on my mother." I said, "I've been building a record, the same way I'd build a record for any situation where someone's behavior needed to be tracked carefully over time. I didn't do it to hurt her, Daniel. I did it because some part of me knew, after that hospital visit, that I was going to need to make a clear case to someone eventually about why boundaries needed to exist." He sat with that for a while. Then he asked, "What do you want to do with it?" I said, "I want to request a meeting. Just the three of us, you, me, and your mother. Not your father, not Vanessa, no audience. I want to lay out calmly and factually exactly what has happened in order with dates, and I want to tell her exactly what access she will have to our daughter going forward, based on whether this pattern continues or stops." Daniel said, "She's not going to respond well to an ultimatum." I said, "It's not an ultimatum, it's a boundary. Those are different things, even if they don't always feel different to the person on the receiving end." We requested the meeting. Diane, to my surprise, agreed quickly. I think some part of her understood, after the hospital incident, that something had shifted, and that she had pushed further than even she had intended. The meeting took place at our house, at my insistence, on my territory rather than hers. I made tea. I did not offer her anything stronger, which I think she noticed and understood as its own small statement. I laid out the folder on our kitchen table, not dramatically, just simply, the way I'd present a chart to a doctor coming onto a shift. I walked through it chronologically: the terrace dinner, with the exact quote; the private investigator; the call to my obgyn's office; the hospital visit, with the time and the witness. Diane listened. She did not interrupt, which itself was unusual for her. When I finished, I said, "Diane, I am 6 months pregnant with your granddaughter. I have spent this entire pregnancy being investigated, accused, and pursued by the one person who should have been celebrating with me. I need you to understand that this ends today, one way or another." She said quietly, "What does that mean? One way or another?" I said, "It means I love my husband, and I want my daughter to have a relationship with her grandmother, but I will not allow anyone who treats my motherhood as a financial conspiracy to have unsupervised access to my child. If this pattern continues after she's born, you will see her only in our presence, only on our terms, for as long as it takes for me to trust that she's safe with you. That's not a threat, Diane. That's a boundary, and I am telling you clearly, in advance, exactly where it sits." Diane was quiet for a long moment after I laid out the boundary. I watched something move behind her eyes, not quite shame, but something adjacent to it. The particular look of a person who has spent decades being the one who sets terms, suddenly confronted with someone else's terms instead. She said, "Finally, I don't know how to apologize for something like this." I said, "You can start with the words. The rest can come later, if it comes at all." She said, "I'm sorry, Harper. I let my concerns about money override basic decency." I see that now, sitting here with all of this written down in front of me. It's different, seeing it laid out plainly like this. I believed her in that moment. The way you can believe someone is sincere about a feeling without yet trusting that the feeling will translate into lasting change. Sincerity and reliability are not the same thing, and I had learned over 11 years of nursing to wait for the second one before fully exhaling. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. I want to be honest about that because I think these stories sometimes promise a complete transformation that doesn't reflect how real change actually happens. Diane did not become a different person. She remained in many ways the same controlled, image-conscious woman she had always been. But something had shifted in the specific dynamic between us. She stopped commenting on our finances. She stopped, as far as I know, any further investigation. When I went into labor 6 weeks after that kitchen table conversation, she did not show up at the hospital. Uninvited, she waited for Daniel's call, and she came only when we were ready for visitors. Our daughter, Eleanor, we named her after Daniel's grandmother, who Diane had always quietly resented for being more generous and more genuinely loved by the family than Diane herself had ever managed to be, was born healthy on a Tuesday morning in March, in the same hospital where I had worked for over a decade, delivered by colleagues who had become like family over the years. Diane visited 2 days later. She brought a gift, not extravagant, which surprised me, just a soft, simple baby blanket handmade, the kind of gift that suggested actual thought rather than a financial gesture. She held Eleanor for 10 careful minutes under my watchful eye and said quietly, "She's beautiful, Harper. I'm sorry it took me this long to be excited the right way." It was not a complete redemption. I want to be careful not to oversell it as one. Diane and I have an arrangement now, more than a relationship, careful, monitored, slowly building trust in small increments. She sees Eleanor regularly, always in our presence or in carefully agreed upon circumstances. She has not, in the year since Eleanor's birth, repeated the kind of behavior that defined those 6 months of pregnancy. Whether that holds for the next year and the year after that, I genuinely don't know. I am watching. I will continue watching, because that is what protecting my daughter requires. Daniel's relationship with his mother has also changed in ways that surprised me. He set his own boundaries during this period separate from mine, but aligned with them, telling Diane clearly that he would not tolerate any repeat of the accusations or the investigations, regardless of how the money was eventually used or not used. The trust fund itself remains largely untouched. We still live in our same house. Daniel still teaches physics. Some things, despite everything, simply didn't need to change. I never used the folder beyond that one kitchen table conversation. I want to be clear about that, because I think people sometimes expect a story like this to end with some dramatic public reveal, some moment of humiliation visited back upon the person who caused the harm. That was never what I wanted. I wanted the truth laid out clearly enough that no one in the room could pretend it hadn't happened. I wanted a boundary stated so precisely that there was no ambiguity left to exploit. And I got both of those things, quietly at my own kitchen table with tea instead of confrontation. That, I have come to believe, is its own kind of power. Not the power of public reckoning, but the power of a woman who knows exactly what she's protecting and exactly what she's willing to do to protect it, stated plainly, once, and then held. If you have ever been accused of wanting something you never actually wanted, if someone has ever looked at the most vulnerable, most real thing happening in your life and called it a strategy, I want you to hear this clearly. Your body is not a financial instrument. Your pregnancy is not a transaction. The life you have built through your own work and your own choices does not require anyone's approval or verification to be real. I spent 11 years learning how to stay calm in rooms where everything was falling apart, because that calm is what allows the actual work of saving someone to happen. I used that same calm on a hotel terrace, in a hospital waiting room, and at my own kitchen table, because I understood something that took me a while to fully articulate. The most powerful response to someone trying to destabilize you is to become more stable, not less. Protecting the people you love does not always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like a folder. Sometimes it looks like tea instead of shouting. Sometimes it looks like stating a boundary once, clearly, and then simply holding it, without needing to repeat yourself or escalate or perform your hurt for anyone's benefit. My daughter will grow up knowing that her mother protected her before she ever drew her first breath. That is not a small thing. That might be the most important thing I have ever documented in my life, more important than any chart, any record, any folder laid out on any table. If someone has ever questioned the realness of your life, your choices, or your love, I hope you find your own version of that kitchen table. Calm, clear-held. Thank you for spending this time with me. If Harper's story meant something to you, if you've ever had to protect what mattered most with patience, instead of noise, I'd love to hear about it in the comments.